who don't. It is, FIRST is actually an acronym. It stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And it is both a sport for the mind, which kind of combines the excitement of a sports competition with the smarts of a science fair. But the other really important part of this is gracious professionalism. It's something that Woody Flowers coined years ago, and it truly is one of the bedrocks of what FIRST is all about. It's about playing really hard. It's about learning and doing your absolute best, but it's also about helping everybody around you. And we've taken that to heart here in Australia. We've tried to create a culture that really is about servant leadership. It really is about trying to put others before ourselves and trying to do everything that we can to help other people. And you'll see that as I go through this. The picture that's here is probably one of my favorite. This is the picture from right after Team 3132 won the Championship Chairman's Award in Houston in 2017. And you can just see from the excitement on these kids' faces that it's something that they had worked for many, many years for, and it was one of those moments of a lifetime. So I thought I would share it with you because it was kind of a fun picture for me. There are 5 parts to the FIRST program now. It starts basically with FIRST LEGO League Discover, which is for the really little children, about ages 4 to 6, and then goes all the way up through FIRST Robotics Competition, which goes all the way through year 12. At least that's what we call it in Australia. I'm not sure how that maps into the Indian school system, but we didn't add them in that order in Australia. And I just sort of wanted to show you quickly the order that it did come. And you can see that we added a new program every 3 or 4 years. FIRST LEGO League was here before we got here. We arrived in 2009. And then FIRST Robotics came shortly thereafter. A couple of years later, we added FTC, or FIRST Tech Challenge, followed by FIRST LEGO League Explore, which used to be called FIRST LEGO League Junior. And then 2 years ago, we added FIRST LEGO League Junior Edition Discovery, which is now just called FIRST LEGO League Discover. So at the moment, we have the entire progression all the way from preschool through year 12, through all of our high school kids. And overall, we have a little bit better than 2,500 FIRST teams around the country. Vast majority of them are in our capital cities, although we do have a number now in the outback as well. So I got thinking about what I wanted to talk to you guys about, and I thought that I should maybe set the stage with how we make decisions around here. And we do have some guiding principles that we try to follow. The first one is, how high should we set the bar? And that one's really important, because if we would have set the bar too low, we wouldn't have accomplished nearly what we have. And realize that what we've done works here in Australia. Everybody has to look at their own culture and figure out how it fits into your particular country, your particular community. For us, we decided that we wanted to set the bar so high that we were going to fail sometimes. If we weren't failing sometimes, it meant that we weren't setting the bar high enough. And so that's worked out really well for us. We do have some spectacular failures, which I can talk about a little bit, or you guys can ask questions about them. I've got some great examples of what not to do. But when the bar is high enough, when you do reach it, you can get some amazing things coming out as well. The next thing that we always talk about is impact. If we're going to take on a new outreach activity or even something new on the robot, what kind of impact is it going to have? If it's something that has no impact or very, very little impact, we probably will pass on doing that. We only have so much time in our lives, and we want to do things that matter. The other thing is, we always talk about, how can we do something better? If we did something this year and we're going to do it again next year, how do we make it 10x or 50x or 100x bigger? We call supersizing it. It's kind of our little play on words. There's a really good video out by Google. It's called Moonshot Thinking. If you haven't seen it, Google it, Moonshot Thinking by Google. It's incredibly inspiring, and it talks about their philosophy and how they're not really interested in something that's going to give them a 10% or a 20% gain in something. They're looking for something for 10x or 20x or 100x. And it will definitely change the way you think. So go look at that video. You'll be really inspired. The next thing is, we want to have fun. Why would we do this if it wasn't fun? Be it for the students, the parents, the mentors, or the community. So if it's not fun, it's probably not going to happen around here. If it is fun, then it goes way up the list of things that we'll consider doing. Another really important guiding principle is, how does this, whatever it is we're talking about, how does it involve other people? Partnerships are very, very important. We've learned the power of partnerships over the years. It's one thing if 3132 or First Australia takes on a project. It's another thing if we can get teams or people from around the world working on it together. All of a sudden, things get bigger and there's more impact. The last thing is something called STEM for everyone, everywhere. And we do believe that. We believe that STEM is for everyone, everywhere. And I put a few pictures in here to sort of show you what I'm talking about. One of them is an all-girls FLL team in the western suburbs of Sydney. And you can see that over here. They had just played at an FLL event. They had a great time. So we believe it's for all genders, all religions, all races. It doesn't matter. This next picture is one that's a little bittersweet for me. The lady in the very center here, and if you can see her, this was my mom. And she was about 88 years old when this picture was taken. I believe it was the first time she had ever volunteered at a first event. And she came over to Sydney and she was working at the Asia Pacific Invitational. And at Friendship Night, a team from Thailand, this young man right here, where's my pointer? Right here, this young man right here came and asked her to dance during Friendship Night. And she didn't really want to do it, but she did. And it was one of those moments that I will never forget. I know she never forgot, that she really did step out of her comfort zone. She is an American, and it was really hard for her to meet people from a lot of different cultures. But after that event, she was a changed woman. And it was just one of those special first moments for us. The picture over here on the far right is actually at our innovation center that we started in Fuzhou, China. And you can see that this is a place that's very different from Sydney. This is at a Chinese school in sort of a low income area. And again, we believe that STEM is for everyone, everywhere. It doesn't matter who, where, or anything else. So those are the principles that we use when we're looking at new projects. And we've had a lot of success with those. So one of the keys to our success, not only by looking at our guiding principles, but also is what we call our home base, which is Macquarie University here in Sydney. And having a university or a major entity behind you has been critical for us to be successful. They have been unbelievably supportive. I work for Macquarie University now, and Macquarie really is the home of First Australia. And people often say to me, why would a university do this? You know, why would a university really care about 4-year-olds doing STEM? But they understand the value and the importance of reaching kids at a very, very early age and having a progression that goes all the way through university. There's some studies that have been done recently that girls actually are starting to believe that they are not going to want to do mathematics, or they're not as good at math and science by the age of 7. That's about year 2 in Australian speak. And that's crazy. So if we want to really change this and we want to encourage everyone everywhere, we have to start at a young age. If we think that waiting until high school is the right thing, and we have lots of programs for girls in high school, while that's great, we've probably already lost the battle. We need to start when these girls and everyone is really young, encouraging them and making sure they understand that STEM and robotics and science and technology and engineering, it's fun. It's just really fun, and anybody can do it and everyone can be good at it. So when we got to Macquarie in 2009, this is kind of a strange slide. In 2009, you can probably guess, but how many engineering graduates do you think happened to be coming out of Macquarie in 2009? Right, well, the answer is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 4 engineering graduates from Macquarie in 2009. And they were going to start looking at engineering and putting a little bit of money in. And then when we came along with the first program, things got rolling. And so in 2013, which is after we had been doing first for about 3 or 4 years there, I wanted to show you what the incoming engineering class looked like. There were around 200 kids, which is pretty impressive, right? And Macquarie could track that directly to the amount of first programs, the amount of kids who were in first, especially in the high school levels. So just for fun, I went and checked what the enrollment was this last year in 2019. And so this next slide, we have over 1,200 incoming freshmen or year 1 university students into engineering at Macquarie. It's been a huge success, and it's been win-win, both for first Australia, for Macquarie, as well as the community and the kids who are involved. So I love this slide. I think that, and I can't wait to see what it's going to look like in another 2 or 3 years. These people, these little people probably won't fit on one screen. All right, so in thinking about the things that we've done and what's made it work, you know, one of the big things is funding. You need to have funding, whether it's for teams or whether it's for events or personnel or admin. You need to have some money behind you in order to make this or anything really work. And we've been really fortunate that we've been able to partner with some pretty big corporates. We were able to get companies like Google and Ford and Boeing and this year Disney involved. And that's great. The other portion that's really important when it comes to looking at how we've grown First Australia was the support that we got from the Australian government. And they didn't give us a lot of money. They gave us a little bit, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But they really have been behind us the entire way, trying to make the connections that we need. There's a program that we have called Leap Robotics that we actually go out to the inner city and in Western Sydney, and we send some of our undergraduates out to run robotics programs in some of those schools, and all of that is funded by the government. They've also helped to identify teachers for us that they think would be great teachers to get programs started, sort of the low-hanging fruit. And I don't think Robots in the Outback could have happened without that. The next thing that's up here is probably one of the most important things, is back in the early days, back in about 2012, we really wanted to get some more FRC teams started. At that point, there was really only 31, 32. It took us a number of years to figure out how to do this. And what they did with us is they gave us a small grant. And what it allowed us to do is it allowed us to pay for other teams. We called it a microbank, but we wanted it to be self-sustaining. And so I think they gave us $25,000. And what we did is we used that, and we were able to pay for a few FRC teams to get started before they had a robot, before they knew anything about it, with the agreement that they would pay us back after they had a robot. And so what happened was we paid for them. They built robots. They played in our off-season event until we got an actual regional. And then they had a robot that it was really easy for them to take out to various corporates and various other sponsor potential people. And having a robot and kids and demonstrating it to a corporate made it a whole lot easier to raise funding. They all paid us back. And now we've given out over $1 million, that money over and over again, every single year with our microbank. Without that, I don't think FRC would have happened in Australia. And so we're really grateful to the New South Wales government for having a little bit of faith in us and giving us a little bit of seed money back in the day. The other one that's kind of fun is we were able to generate enough interest that we had our prime minister. At the time, it was Malcolm Turnbull. I think this happened in 2016. So that's Malcolm Turnbull and his wife. You can also see Craig Lundy is here, and Julie Bishop was there, who's also was our foreign minister. But they came to the regional, they walked around. You can see here, someone from 3132 is explaining the robot to all of them. They had a great time. They stayed a couple of hours, and it made a big difference. Just the amount of press that was generated by having them there was awesome. So we're very, very grateful to the Australian and the New South Wales state government for their support. So I talked a little bit about partnerships back in the beginning, and I tried to make a list of some of the international partnerships that we've worked on. But the very first one is probably the most important, and that was the Australian ecosystem. So while you'll see a lot of countries on this list, we've done a lot of things in the Asia Pacific region. The most important thing to us always has been, and probably always will be, is having a really healthy, growing Australian ecosystem. If things weren't growing here, if we were having trouble in Australia, we never would have left Australia. So I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind as more and more countries come on board, is that it's great to go out, it's great to help other people, but you have to take care of things in your own backyard first. So we've always viewed our own backyard, first of all, as Sydney, second of all as New South Wales, and third of all as Australia. Now that's grown as the years have gone on. We sort of view all of Australia as our backyard now. We need to make sure that Australia is in good shape before we go and help other people. But I just wanted to make that point because a lot of people say, oh, it's really easy to go and start teams and start doing things in other countries. And yes, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But if you make sure that you have your own backyard taken care of first, everything gets a whole lot easier. You can see we've done things around the world, basically. We have opened a robotics innovation center near Fuzhou in the Fujian province in China. It supports 12 low-income schools there. When we were still able to, before this virus took off, we would make 3 to 4 to 5 trips a year over there. We've been to all 12 of the schools now. We've started FLL. We run an FLL event every year in their schools. We had just started FTC. We were supposed to start running an FTC competition over there every year, but that's on hold at the moment. We're trying to do some things virtually, but it's a little tricky. But yeah, if you ever want to go to China, if you ever want to go to Fuzhou, China, there's a pretty cool innovation center in one of the high schools now. It's up on the 5th floor, and there's all kinds of equipment and audio-visual equipment and everything you might ever want to need to run robotics there. The two that I really wanted to highlight here, though, are the two at the bottom. The Compass Alliance, which was something that we started a couple of years ago. We sat around one day and we're just chatting about what we wanted to do. This was after we had already entered the Hall of Fame. We won the Championship Chairman's Award. And we didn't want to be one of those teams that stopped doing stuff because outreach is really fun and it can be really impactful. And it's what our team has been built on since the very beginning. So we're like, what could we do? And we decided that we wanted to start working with more teams. So we asked about 4 or 5 teams from around the world to get together, and we had a few chats to brainstorm, and the Compass Alliance is what has come out of that. And I think that that is a really good example of what can happen when you work with other people. I think if we had tried to pull something like that off just on our own, it might have worked, but it probably would not have had the same level of impact. We wouldn't have created near the same number of resources or had enough people to do the things that the Compass Alliance is doing. So we're really proud of the Compass Alliance. And we're really proud that we're the ones who started that and founded it and asked other people to join us. Last one is the 24 Hours of STEM. That one just came up this year. And again, we wanted to do something bigger than just a virtual conference. And so that was our way of trying to get people from around the world involved. We did run a 24-hour virtual conference. And we had a team from India participate, which was awesome. I believe we had, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4,000 views of it, something like that. And now all of that is we're putting it up on YouTube as we speak. I can tell you we're going to do another one in December, so check it out when the time comes. All right, now we get into things that are a little bit more fun to listen to, maybe some stories, because people love stories. I would much prefer to tell stories than to talk about other kinds of things. So we are definitely risk takers around here. We definitely believe that we want to take risks. We want to try big things. And if we fail, that's okay. We will innovate. Hopefully we will improve and hopefully we'll inspire along the way. And when we talk about that, that's what FIRST is really all about. It's really about encouraging you to take risks in a safe space, learn from that, and then do things better and hopefully make things succeed in the long run. I wanted to tell you the story of how Robots in the Outback sort of got started. Robots in the Outback is a program that we run where we really are trying to start FIRST teams around the country. And our first attempt at this was at a little place called the Batchelor Institute. It's a 100% Indigenous school. It's located up a little bit south of Darwin, which is in the Northern Territory here. And there's not much around Batchelor Institute. But we had a contact there. We had a teacher who was pretty psyched about it. We had a sponsor who was willing to pay for most of it. So we got on a plane and off we went to the Batchelor Institute. And we helped them. We tried to do the best that we could for them. There were a lot of challenges in that space that we really weren't aware of. We did manage to get them to our off-season event one year, and then everything just sort of stopped. It just didn't work. We learned a lot of things. We learned that we just weren't providing enough support. We were providing the wrong kind of support. Pretty much if you could do it wrong, we did it wrong. And so the Batchelor Institute only participated for 1 year. We all feel bad about that. We'd like to go back and try again. But what happened was we took those lessons and we talked to that sponsor, and that sort of turned into what is now Robots in the Outback, which I'll talk about probably on the next slide, I think, which has been a huge success. But without that first failure, without that huge risk that we took, I don't think Robots in the Apple would have happened. I think that we would have tried to do it and we would have had the same problems, but on a lot bigger of a scale. And it probably would have been enough of a train wreck that our sponsor would have pulled out. So we started small. We had some really bad things happen. And then, we tried and we learned. So that was a big risk that we took that paid off. The Duel Down Under was another risk that we took. So 3132 was the only team here for a number of years. We tried to talk to other people about starting teams, and it was just too hard. FRC is just too hard. The nearest event was thousands of miles away. It wasn't going to happen. So we said, okay, that's the problem. We're going to announce that we're going to have an off-season event. One team in the country. We're going to play with just us if we have to. But we're going to hold this thing. We're going to call it the Duel Down Under, and it's going to happen. So that's what we did. In about 2 weeks, we had 6 more teams agree to join us. So there were 7 teams at the first Duel Down Under. We held it up at Barker College. Our field was made out of wood. We played 2-on-2 because when you have 7 teams, you can't really play 3-on-3. You'd be playing almost every single round. We learned some really important things at that event as well. We had all of our pits in a classroom, and the door to the classroom was about 3 inches, or I don't know, what's that about? 30 centimeters. Too small for the bumpers. And so if you wanted to go into your pit, you had to take the bumpers off. And then when you came out of the pit, you had to put your bumpers back on. And we didn't realize that. So we ended up making a little bumper assembly and disassembly area right next to the field because that was the best that we could do. But we made it through the Duel Down Under. We had a lot of people come and see it. Was it brilliant? No, but it was really, really fun. And it showed Australia what FRC is all about. Without that event, I don't think FRC would have ever happened. I don't think we'd have gotten enough people to have an actual regional until we had that off season to show people what it was all about. First was great. First headquarters helped us in terms of just providing some options for teams where they could sign up to play and pay the fee, but actually not pick a regional. And so there was a lot of stuff that went on back then, but that was a really fun time. Again, a huge risk. What would we have done if we had announced this off-season event, built the field, and had nobody turn up? That would have been even worse. So again, a big risk. Another risk that we took was we decided we wanted to run an Asia Pacific Invitational for both FLL and FTC. This was probably back in about, 2013, 2014, something like that. And for FTC in particular, at that point, we hadn't even run a national, I think we had run one national event, one event where I think we had maybe 11 teams. And all of a sudden, we're going to invite teams from around the world to come and play in Sydney, because that was a good idea. And I can remember walking around the World Championship to almost every FTC team that had done well saying, hey, you ever been to Sydney? We're going to have this amazing event. You need to come over to Sydney. You should come play FTC in Sydney. It's something you'd never forget. And how could you not want to come to Sydney in July? It's beautiful. It's not beautiful here in July. It's the dead of winter. But, it's a beautiful place. And imagine my surprise when the world champions, the Cougar Robotics team, said, yeah, we'll come. We were like, really? And then they invited one of their alliance members, and they turned up as well. So we had these world-class teams coming, and quite frankly, we had no idea what we were doing. So we started running the event, and we had some teams there who were very, very sophisticated. And they started asking hard questions about, well, how is this going to work? And how is that going to work? And I didn't have a clue. I'm the tournament director. I'm standing in front of these people running coaches meeting, and they're asking me questions that, quite frankly, I had no idea. And I can remember the coach from Cougar Robotics, his name is Jamie Diamond. He was sitting near the back of the room. And every time I would get a question, I didn't know what to do, I would look at him and he would mouth me the answer. He'd be like, yes, you want to do that, or don't do that. No, bad idea. And whatever he said. I had no idea if I was saying the right thing or not. But they were great. And we got through the event. We all had a good time. And it turns out one of their students actually ended up coming as our first scholarship winner, which I'll tell you about in just a second. Another team that came that year was Schrodinger's Hat from Alaska. You might know them. They actually won the Inspire Award at the World Championship a couple of years later. And They are amazing. They used to live in Alaska. Since then, they've moved, and I think they're living in the Virginia area now, but they were almost ready to quit first. Things had not gone well. They didn't have a robot they were happy with, but they decided to come to Sydney anyway. That was at the same event. And we had a great time with them. And they met people from around the world in a really unique atmosphere. Maybe not as well, definitely not as competitive as the World Championship, but it encouraged them in a way that they're still involved now. They were the US's first global team, and they're just amazing people. But I believe they would have quit first if they hadn't come to API. So it was really good for us to be able to see that we could have an impact, that we could change the lives of other people, and that spurred us on to bigger things. You never know what's going to happen from a really crazy idea. We rarely say no. And what happened with this young man from Cougar Robotics is he was sort of wandering around campus one day in the middle of our Asia Pacific event. And he decided he really liked Macquarie. He thought he wanted to come there. And so we pushed really hard and we got some first scholarships. And it turns out he came over on our first scholarship. He spent 4 years here. He mentored 3132. He was a volunteer at just about every First Australia event that we ran. He graduated a couple of years ago. He's now back in California working at a medical robotics company. And it turns out he brought a couple of his friends with him the following year. And so we got a couple more kids who came along from that same FTC team. And that was hugely impactful for us. All of a sudden, we had other people who knew what they were doing, especially when it came to FTC. And it's just been a really good path. That none of that would have happened if we hadn't decided we were going to run this Asia Pacific event, which again was a huge risk. So moving on. All right, I mentioned that 3132's motto is STEM for everyone, everywhere. And if I use the term RITA, that stands for Robots in the Outback. Figure this is a first presentation